Leading Muslim apologists Ahmed Deedat, Shabir and Zakir Naik have appealed to Jesus' teaching pertaining to his fate in the sign of Jonah. The sign of Jonah appears 3 times in the Gospels. Let's look at the reference primarily cited by Muslim apologists, Matthew chapter 12, verses 39 and 40. When some Jewish leaders asked Jesus to show them a sign from heaven that he was who he claimed, Jesus answered, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Muslim apologists note that Jonah was alive when swallowed by the huge fish. He was also alive while inside of the fish. He was also alive when he emerged from the fish. Thus, when Jesus provided the sign of Jonah, he must have intended to communicate that he would be alive when placed in the tomb, alive while inside of the tomb, and alive while emerging from the tomb. Therefore, according to Muslim apologists, the sign of Jonah supports the Quran's assertion that Jesus did not die, but that God made it appear that he had, and then took him to heaven. This argument is guilty of the cherry-picking fallacy. Imagine that you own a business that makes cherry pies. You're meeting with a farmer who wants to sell you a large batch of cherries that were just picked. He shows you a handful of beautiful cherries from the batch, but he fails to mention that most of the cherries in the batch don't look like the ones he's showing you at the moment. One is guilty of the cherry-picking fallacy when using select data that point to a certain conclusion while ignoring other data that lead to a different conclusion. Muslim apologists are guilty of the cherry-picking fallacy when appealing to the sign of Jonah, because they ignored numerous other texts in the same Gospels wherein Jesus is clearly speaking of his impending death. For example, we saw what Jesus taught about the sign of Jonah in Matthew. So notice what else Matthew reports Jesus teaching his disciples. Matthew 16, verse 21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised. Matthew 17, verses 22 and 23. As they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the 3rd day." When read in isolation, the sign of Jonah is ambiguous and could be understood either in a sense of Jesus dying or not dying. However, responsible hermeneutics requires one to interpret an ambiguous text in light of others that are clear. And when we read Jesus clearly predicting his death elsewhere in the same gospel, not to mention similar predictions found in the earlier Gospel of Mark, it's nothing short of irresponsible of Muslim apologists to isolate Jesus' sign of Jonah then interpret it as Jesus teaching he would not die. Muslim apologists doing this would be the first to object if Christian apologists did likewise with the Quran, which would be quite easy. For example, Surah 19:33 portrays Jesus saying, "Peace be upon me, the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I am raised alive." A Christian apologist could claim that the Quran supports the New Testament because it mentions the death and resurrection of Jesus. But such claim would be guilty of the cherry-picking fallacy, since those making it would ignore what the Quran and Islamic tradition says about Jesus elsewhere, in spite of the fact that the Quranic texts are vague. I want to mention one more item in reference to the sign of Jonah. Jesus spoke of being in the earth 3 days and 3 nights. However, according to all 4 Gospels, Jesus was buried Friday afternoon and raised Sunday morning. That's less than 2 days. Is this a contradiction? No. 3 days was a linguistic idiom meaning a short period of time. The Akkadian language used it to express a medical prognosis of a quick recovery from illness. It is also an idiom in Hebrew literature. In the book of Esther, Esther tells her fellow Jews the following, "Go, assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens also will fast in the same way. And thus I will go in to the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish." Now notice what happens 2 verses later. "Now it came about on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's rooms. And the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. Esther did not wait a full 3 days and 3 nights. Instead, she went to the king on the third day. Since Matthew mentions the 3 days and 3 nights in the sign of Jonah, it's helpful to observe Matthew's use of a 3-day motif when speaking of the timing of Jesus' resurrection. Matthew says it occurred on the third day, after 3 days, and after 3 days and 3 nights. Of particular interest is what Matthew reports what the Jewish leaders requested when they approached Pilate. Sir, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, "After 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead." It's clear that the 3-day motif is at play here. Otherwise, the Jewish leaders would not be asking Pilate to have a guard stationed at the tomb until the third day, when Jesus had said he would rise after 3 days. In other words, there would be no guards at the tomb at the very time they would be most needed. So the term 3 days and 3 nights was an idiom meaning a short period of time. To summarize, Muslim apologists are acting in an irresponsible manner when appealing to Jesus' sign of Jonah in order to suggest the Gospels teach that Jesus knew he was not going to die. They are guilty of the cherry-picking fallacy since they interpret the ambiguous sign of Jonah in a manner that contradicts what Jesus said on several occasions in the same Gospels. Moreover, because a 3-day motif is clearly in play, there is no tension between the sign of Jonah's 3 days and 3 nights and the time that elapsed between Jesus' death and resurrection as reported in the Gospels.